What's going on, guys? Crave here, and let's take a look at the open beta for The Division. Now, it's been talked about for a while now, so let's just, recap all the things that have been mentioned by the media, the blogs you see online, and some of the other YouTubers. Now, first things first is that it is a cover shooter, so being out in the open or a Rambo type player is basically a no-no, as it is so easy to soak up. And well, take note that I did use the word soak up damage, where every single hostile can basically just have fun with you. Now, if you want a comparison of the combat style, it's basically just like Gears of War or Mass Effect. More on the combat style in Mass Effect 3. Now, it also uses it uses realistic settings, so that's pretty obvious given that Tom Clancy's name is stamped on the game's title screen or box. The theme is modern day New York, where you see the world without magic or any fantasy elements, and uses standard weapons you might find in most shooters. So there are some elements that are somewhat quote unquote unrealistic to the common person, but it's still pretty much what I would call current reality, or the technology involved in the game or being put in the game is somewhat within our timeline. Connected to that is the apocalyptic scenario where a virus has been set loose and appears to have sowed chaos and a whole lot of disorder in society. So what you'll see in the game is basically military groups are now doing their best to restore normal functions to society, but you of course have groups that also want to basically just take advantage of the situation. And of course, being a division agent, you're part of the group that wants to ideally set things right. Now that means taking out the bad guys, and of course, as one of the many issues that have been already cited in the internet, you encounter the bullet spawn scenario where it takes so much firepower to basically just bring down hostiles, even though you're bathing them with bullets in the head. So I believe in this case, it's the disconnect with reality that puts off most people. One other issue that has been brought to light is the graphics of the game. So, it's basically just that usual downgrade discussion. Let's just admit it, Ubisoft is quite popular with that one. Not to say that other developers and publishers aren't guilty of it, but yeah, they did this with one of their major releases just recently, and I guess people are just sort of very good at remembering stuff. And I just have to say that being on the PC platform right now, I'll say it looks okay for an MMO party-based online shooter. If this were a single-player game, with basically no other things to consider like online components, then I would say that it looks terrible if you max it out. But being an online game, it looks okay. I mean, I'm not sure how it looks on consoles, but at least I can say that it isn't bad on PC. And I think that should pretty much round up my recap of the game, at least the major things that have to be pointed out for the game. Now, let's get into my thoughts for what Ubi is showing so far and what it might mean for everyone else. Now, first off, I have to say that it is a fun game. Now, the beta was so short in terms of what was allowed for players to check out, but yes, it was fun. The cover system, yes, it isn't perfect, as it sometimes glitches where you can't see your target. It's sort of sometimes I would encounter this scenario where you would basically just see your shoulder instead of your target. It's annoying when it happens, but it doesn't happen that very often. Now, there are no issues with the controls in general, and it's pretty straightforward. So even leveling up and equipping your skills isn't difficult to understand. You're basically just allowed to equip 2 skills at a given time, unless you sort of set some time to basically swap out your skills and equip certain mods. So you're basically allowed. It's pretty easy. It's nothing difficult to figure out. So you're just basically allowed to get into the action. And well, of course, in higher levels of gameplay, of course, in terms of team effort and coordination, then you'll have to spend more time in thinking of which skills to use and which mods to equip. But of course, this is just the open beta, and it's basically just a demo, a very short and limited demo, and you're not really going to be able to experience a whole lot of that requirement to think about which skills to equip. I mean, basically just equip your skills and have fun. The realistic setting is great, coupled with the doomsday or societal breakdown scenario, which really isn't something new if you think about it, given all the games, TV shows, and movies that cover the theme. Now, still, it looks like, well, UB put in their own flavor nicely. But I really can't deny that it does go against the bullet sponge idea. Now, I personally do not mind bullet sponges for as long as they are not the basis for endgame difficulty or, even while you're progressing your character. I just think that, difficulty has to be about strategy, proper skill, and, sort of just pumping your character with so much loot and better gear to, basically try to get up to speed on the difficulty of an encounter. Now, it is weird when you first encounter it. I mean, it's frustrating and tiresome. You sort of get that feeling of being tired, even though it's the first time you encounter it. I mean, unloading on a seemingly unarmed and uncovered hostile with your assault rifle and have that specific scenario take what, 4 or 5 seconds for that hostile to die? Yeah, it's not realistic. Now, it is a disconnect from what you know in reality, but UB did set the expectation that it was going to be like that, so I'm fine with that. Again, my only concern is that it should not be the basis of endgame difficulty or even as you level up your character. In terms of the stuff you can do in the open beta, I sort of gave away that the notion of that really there isn't much to do, or there wasn't really a whole lot to do in the open beta. Like really not too much. And what's sort of unnerving about it is that there's also not a whole lot happening while you're crossing between main and side missions. So there's a whole lot of running around involved so far with what I've seen in the open beta. And other than the occasional persona in need of some help or some random NPC, there wasn't really a whole lot of activity. And it is possible that it's sort of made to lend to the setting of the game, but I sure wish there was more stuff going on in the surroundings. And even with some of the stuff that was happening, like you see some looters or some gang members or whatever, some hostiles in the streets, they're all doing the same thing. It's a typical scenario, at least in the open beta. When I checked it out, you would always find in the same spot the same 2 people trying to loot a dead some corpse, and they're the same level, 4 or 5, and you just gun them down. And yeah, it's just, even though that's activity happening on the streets, it's just it sort of gets stale. It's the same thing you see again and again if you happen to be crossing the same street. And the long jog from base to base or mission to mission, as I mentioned, is, it also has a very tedious feel to it. And having more activity, like I mentioned, having more activity on the streets would, indeed help. I'm not sure what the plans are for traveling once the other sections of the game open up. Probably a VTOL or a helicopter ride for fast travels. I'm not sure. But, it would sure be nice to address these 2 things, the lack of stuff happening on the streets and maybe, how to address this sort of tediousness of just running around the city into different areas. I haven't really checked the boards of Ubisoft and what they plan to do, but I hope these 2 things get addressed. And of course, the ever-famous Dark Zone. So it's where you can find some sense of replayability, as it is the evolving scenarios that involves other players trolling or just helping you out. It's the Dark Zone, and it's a PvP area that also is filled with PvE targets. And when I say PvE targets, really tough PvE targets. Yes, that's where you find probably the worst or the best examples of bullet sponges. And according to Ubisoft, it's where you get the best shinies or loot to basically just satiate your drive to get stronger gear-wise. And being a PvP zone is also the area where you encounter, like I mentioned, trolls. And I got a taste of it the first time I got into the zone. I was immediately ganked as I made my way through the first intersection. Really just the very first intersection for the checkpoint. And yeah, 2 players just ganked me just like that. And I wasn't even carrying any damn loot. That was the funny thing. So it was really just a fun gang. And but the thing is, it's not always going to be like that. Now, some people are just interested also, just like most people are just interested in grabbing the loot and making sure they get extracted out of that zone. Now, and basically just watching some of the players in Dark Zone, it looks like some of them are only interested in hunting rogue agents. So I think because of that, minus the really terrible feeling you get when you get ganked and you lose the loot you ideally should be, having extracted, I think Ubisoft did fine in this aspect. It makes for a very tense-filled moment once you enter the dark zone. You can't tell who is your friend or ally unless, of course, you got your real-life friends in comms with you or in a group with you. And it really makes for an exciting and tension-filled playtime. So the Dark Zone, I don't think it's for players who don't like getting ganked. I don't like getting ganked, but I can take it. I'll just get up and maybe try and find the person who ganked me. If I can't catch them or find them again, then so be it. I'll just shrug it off and enjoy the loot and things like that. But of course, if you don't participate in the Dark Zone, it may mean not getting the best gear, and that should be understandable given that you didn't participate in the area where the best gear could be found. So, personally, I see myself joining in once in a while, probably just for the heck of it, but yeah, just for the heck of it. And those are my thoughts for the Division beta. And of course, like I mentioned, the beta was very short. Not a whole lot to do. It's basically just a teaser of the starting part of the game, which is not really everything you need, all the information you need to basically make an educated purchase, or to get enough information whether or not you should purchase the game. There's not a whole lot of information about the end game, which is the very important part, and the progression from from levels 9, 8 when you get to max level, and then what do you do at max level, what are the activities involved, what are the guild type activities or clan type activities that you can do. Yeah, those things, not a whole lot of information going around for those things. But I think that those things are important. Ubisoft should just make sure that they have a clear plan of, how to address the wonderings of people about endgame and progression. And this game, to be honest, is really, it really has my attention. And but I am hoping that things turn out basically for the better, based off the thoughts I mentioned earlier and my worries about endgame and progression. Basically, if I do post another video about the Division right after the launch date, which I think is on the 8th or the 12th, or probably the 8th, it only means I purchased the game. Anyway, thanks for checking this out, guys, and I'll see you.